Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. What do Animal Farm, Dr. Zhivago, and Uncle Tom's Cabin have in common? They're books that have been banned at one time or another for one reason or another. With me today to talk about banned books is Beth Wilson, Executive Director of the ACLU of Kentucky. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Let's just get this out in the open. The ACLU of Kentucky is about as popular in the bluegrass state as a wet dog at a wedding. How do you deal with that?
Well, let me tell you, the ACLU we get accused of many, many things, and most of them are not true. We exist to defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and we have about 4,000 members in the state. That's double what it was a few years ago. Yes, we're very controversial. There are lots of people who really despise us, but we're on the side of protecting freedom, and that's what keeps us going.
Tell us a little bit about the history. When was the ACLU of Kentucky formed?
The ACLU of Kentucky was founded in 1955. A group of very brave men and women came together to form the ACLU of Kentucky after Anne and Carl Braden, a white couple in Louisville, were charged with sedition after selling a home to an African-American family. And the Bradens were feared to be communists. Carl Braden was convicted of those charges, spent 18 months in jail.
Did he write for the Courier Journal?
He and Anne both were
Both
journalists.
did, yeah.
Yep, yep. And his conviction was finally overturned on appeal, but not till he'd spent 18 months in jail. So.
And I will say that one of the founders of the ACLU of Kentucky was a Paducah lawyer named Joe Freeland.
I know that name.
Tremendous criminal attorney. He was
Yeah.
sort of the Ben Matlock and Perry Mason of Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
Was it George Street Boone also involved in that, the attorney from Elkton?
He was involved very early on. I don't know that he's on the list of actual founders. I think a lot of them were Louisville folks who really came together to support the defense of the Bradens. Not to support the Bradens, because they too feared the Bradens were communists, but certainly to support their defense.
The United States Constitution has the First Amendment, which is pretty plain, about as plain as it gets. As an American citizen, we have the right to free expression. Yet, through the years, going all the way back, people have attempted to ban various books and speech. Tell us a little about the history of that. We were talking earlier about the Aid and Sedition Act. Not nice to criticize John Adams and the Federalists.
That's right. You know, even our Constitution's framers, who had put the Bill of Rights together in the first place, weren't very respectful of it in the beginning. And early on, government came along and said, you know, you can't criticize the government, and if you do, you're going to face a prison sentence. And that was sort of the beginning of a long series of attempts by the government to suppress speech, to stop people from speaking out, from writing, from protesting, and there's many examples on down through.
And again, we talked about this earlier. On the one hand, American law is very strong on the side of free speech, free expression, but yet there have been so many attempts to stifle this from various groups. Again, we were talking earlier, a lot of the censorship comes from individuals, a lot of involving schools, parents, and that sort of thing. Is that the most come from parents or individuals as opposed to groups?
Well, I would say in this day and time that probably is in fact the case. And the American Library Association has been compiling statistics on challenges in public libraries, school libraries, and schools themselves since about 1990, I think. And I think the primary source of those challenges is from parents who are understandably concerned about what their children are reading, what their children are hearing, what their children are seeing. I think the fear is when the government steps in or overtakes, the situation, and a school district itself, or some branch of government, be it the school district or a library, decides to pull something and censor it. That doesn't happen very often with libraries. I mean, libraries are very protective of the First Amendment. But these parents, I think, are just need more information. They want to know what their kids are reading, and that's very understandable. But I think what we need to make sure is not happening is that we're not pulling the very things that are going to help our students learn, that are going to help them have better access to the world and to all that's going on around them.
One of the books that, actually a series of books have been banned, are the Harry Potter stories. Now,
Yeah.
our son, who is now 13, when he was younger, loved the Harry Potter stories. What is it that people object to about Harry Potter?
You know, that's a really good question. I think that the Harry Potter series deserves a lot of credit for getting a lot of young readers back involved in reading, and it's certainly that is certainly a series popular among all the preteens and teens that I know, and I think reading is a great thing, and that needs to happen. You know. People are challenging not only the Harry Potter series, but other books based on a variety of things. And I'm not saying that this is true of that series or any of the other challenge books, but they often talk about sexual content. They often talk about offensive language. They often talk about violence. And one of the Supreme Court justices one time said, "One man's vulgarity is another's lyric." And I think we got to keep that in mind when we're talking about freedom of expression, because what's not so good to one of us may be wonderful to another, and that's why the government needs to stay out of this censorship thing.
Well, again, haven't plays of Shakespeare been censored at one time or another? Some of the great works of literature, the Canterbury Tales.
Absolutely.
And here, a few years ago, a William Faulkner novel was banned, As I Lay Dying. I mean, Faulkner is a Nobel Prize-winning writer.
Right.
And these things come up.
Yeah.
Well, again, getting back to Harry Potter, I just couldn't fathom that as to what people object to with this. And so there's your organization willing to step in and take the most unpopular cases and that sort of thing. Let's talk. One of the books you mentioned, we were talking earlier, was of course The Grapes of Wrath. And that was banned in the county, in the grape picking area of California, because of that. And again, this is great literature.
Absolutely.
What is the Supreme Court standard currently on censorship? And I know this is varied down through the years, but today, what is the litmus test, if you will, for that?
Generally, the test is still holding sort of clear and present danger, and something that generally the Supreme Court, and we saw this not so long ago, 96, I'm not sure about the year, with the Communications Decency Act that Congress had tried to pass, that Congress did pass in order to regulate content on the internet. And fortunately, the Supreme Court saw the problems with that and the free expression trampling and overturned the act, so we don't have that now. But basically, you got to prove that censoring something is necessary in order to provide protection from physical harm. That somebody's words in a book or the theatrical performance or artwork is gonna harm a person or individual physically, and you can't usually prove that. So we really are one of the most protective countries in the world when it comes to free speech and free expression. But these challenges just continue, and we've got to stay really vigilant to make sure that we maintain that freedom. Mm-hmm. And we've got to put up with stuff we don't like. We've got to put up with stuff that we may find offensive, as individuals, or sometimes stuff that's just plain bad, bad art, bad books. Mm-hmm. It's all out there, but we've got to have access in our society to all that's available.
Mm-hmm. A recent case involving a middle school teacher in Jefferson County burning an American flag. Tell us about that case and what's the status of that as we speak.
Well, there has not been resolution yet that I'm aware of. A Jefferson County middle school teacher, I believe, was sort of created a hoopla among some parents when he came into class one day and burned a flag. And he did this, and it was a small flag, by the way, and there were lots of safety precautions in place to make sure that there was no fire getting out of control. He did this to get his students thinking about free expression and free speech, and what does it mean to them? What does the flag mean to them, and how did they feel when they saw him burn the flag? And he wanted them to go home and talk to their parents about what this was like and what happened, and then he wanted them to write about it. And I say, way to go, teacher. I mean, that's an important thing to get students thinking about and creating a real life situation for them to consider. But a lot of folks got really upset about it because it did involve the burning of a flag, which, as we know, is quite important to a number of people. And so the teacher was investigated by local police and prosecutors, and I understand that he is not going to be charged criminally, but apparently the school district is still deciding what's going to happen with his career. He was pulled out of the classroom and put on administrative duty, so he's not teaching at the moment. But the thing about this is, if he had burned anything other than a flag, a report card, a test, I don't think we would have had quite the reaction that came with this. And he touched some nerves, and I think that's an important part of the educational process, and it's an important part of students learning. And it's also a protected, at this point anyway, the burning of the American flag is protected by the United States Supreme Court. Now, this teacher has been very clear that he wasn't doing this as a protest, but it's a protected action at the moment.
And of course, that's an issue from time to time. Congress, they've introduced measures, an amendment to forbid flag burning. That's such an explosive issue. I mean, on the one hand, this nation stands for free speech, but yet that flag is so important to some people.
It is, and it is quite an emotional issue. And in fact, this year, when Congress was considering that amendment, again, we had the closest vote ever. It did not pass, and I don't remember the numbers, but it was closer than it's ever been. But I think one thing that we've got to keep in mind is people who died protecting our country died to protect these freedoms that we're now trying to defend. And one of those freedoms is free expression and free speech and the right to protest the government. And we as individuals may feel very personally offended by people who burn a flag. I mean, my father was a World War II veteran, and I feel very strongly about that. But I absolutely support that right to speech and that right to protest, and if someone chooses to do that by burning a flag, that's got to be his or her choice.
Essentially, you could mention that a number of years ago in one of my classes, we were discussing the First Amendment and free speech, and I raised the issue of flag burning, and it touched off quite a stormy debate between two men, a veteran. One was a Navy veteran, not of Vietnam. One was an Army veteran of Vietnam, had been wounded, and the Army veteran said, I was wounded in Vietnam protecting the right of someone to burn that flag. Right. And that was a pretty unassailable argument. Yeah. At least the other guy got quiet after that. But again, it is such an emotional issue.
Yeah.
Other First Amendment issues, and again, it's the old clear and present danger test. If something that you do or say or write will cause physical harm, there again, it's all where you draw the line, isn't it?
It sure is. And the classic example, of course, is shouting fire, falsely shouting that there's a fire in a crowded theater. And yeah, I mean, we got to not let that happen. But it's a real slippery slope when we start looking at some of these other issues. I mean, there's a lot of things that a majority of us could probably agree are pretty offensive and pretty awful, and we don't like to see them happening, or we don't like to hear about them. But you know, we at the ACLU and so far the Supreme Court has really recognized that you gotta protect that freedom, and that if you start limiting it based on the content, or, you know, because it's by one particular group or another, then all of us are in danger, all of our rights are imperiled. First Amendment's really the basis for everything that we have.
Another interesting issue, and my students always find this interesting, and I always enjoy discussing this with them, is the issue of pornography.
Yeah.
Now, I like to present it that under American law, I can define murder, I can define rape, I can define robbery, but can you absolutely define what pornography is?
No, is the short answer.
And so then the response to that is, how can you legislate, how can you pass a law criminalizing something that you can't define? And this is always a fun discussion.
Yeah, I bet it is.
And well, the one Supreme Court justice you mentioned, I know it when I see it.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you get at that issue of pornography?
Well, it's as you said. I mean, you know, you outlined it pretty perfectly. Pornography is not a legal term. There is no definition, and the Supreme Court justice who said, "I know it when I see it," has, you know, that pretty well sums up the problems here. You know, and let me say too, this pornography is one of those issues that's sort of tough for the ACLU. A group of feminists came out several years ago,
Exactly.
really
demeaning for women.
that it's
women, yeah.
absolutely that it's bad for women, that it demeans women, that it, you know, is harassing to women, and women's rights are something that the ACLU has long supported, but not to the detriment of the First Amendment and free expression. And the courts have really struggled over the years trying to find a definition that worked, but they're all so vague and so subjective, it just doesn't happen. Now, occasionally something will be deemed legally obscene, and but you know, those vague definitions just...
Well, you know, for a while it was community standards.
Yeah.
But again, under American law, you really can't have that. You can't have. It's okay to murder here, but it's okay to murder in Bowling Green, but not Paducah.
Right.
And that's another. This issue has always fascinated me because, again, it's as I said, the Canterbury Tales, Shakespeare, and a lot of the criticism, a lot of the parents. It's language that they consider offensive, or there's sexuality in it that they find offensive.
Right.
One thing I know you have in that folder is a list of some of the current banned books. Let's run that list
right.
and see if these are familiar.
If I can find them. Yeah, this is the 2005 list from...
And this is from
the American Library Association.
Right.
And the American Library Association keeps up with the challenges that occur. And do you know that more than a challenge a day occurs in our country? In 2005, they recorded 405 challenges to books in either schools, libraries, or public libraries.
And there are probably more than that are not recorded.
Right. The Library Association estimates that for every challenge they hear about, there are 4 or 5 that they don't hear about. So there's a lot. Okay, there's a couple of books on here by the same author, Robbie Harris. The first is It's Perfectly Normal, which was challenged for homosexuality, nudity, sex education, religious viewpoint, abortion, and being unsuited to any age group. That was covers the range.
Tell us where these are challenged.
You know, I don't have that here. Okay. And in fact, you know, these are the most challenged books, so it means they were challenged in a lot of different places. Yeah. I would direct folks who have internet access, though, to the American Library Association website, which has lots of great information and graphs and charts about...
Which is www.
I think it's ALA.org.
I would bet it would be.
But if not, American Library Association, and
Google.
your search engine will get you there.
Yeah.
The other book by Robbie Harris that was much challenged was It's So Amazing, a book about eggs, sperm, birth, babies, and families, challenged for sex education and sexual content. The very often challenged Forever by Judy Blume. Judy Blume has been writing, she's written some adult books, but she's primarily written for what I think of as a young adolescent girl age, and Forever was challenged for sexual content and offensive language. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger.
Now that's an old one.
That is an old one.
How is that golden oldie on the list?
For sexual content, offensive language, and being unsuited to age group. A lot of these classics come and go from the list. Of Mice and Men is on there a lot. The Grapes of Wrath is still on there a lot. Adventures of Huckleberry Finn are on there a lot. Those three aren't on there this year, but a lot of these things we think of as sort of classic literature come and go, and I don't know if that's just teaching style and teachers teaching those more frequently or what, but they come and go. This year we also have The Chocolate War by Robert Cormier for sexual content and offensive language. I don't know what that's about. Whale Talk by Chris Crutcher for racism and offensive language. Detour for Emmy by Marilyn Reynolds for sexual content. What My Mother Doesn't Know by Sonia Sonace for sexual content and being unsuited to age group. And one of my personal favorites, and I frankly haven't read this and I have no idea what it's about, but the Captain Underpants series by Dave Pilkey for anti-family content, being unsuited to age group, and violence. I don't know how violent Captain Underpants could be, but...
I don't even know who Captain Underpants is.
No, I don't either. I don't either. But I don't have young children either, so I don't...
Ours is 13, so he's beyond Captain Underpants.
Yeah, and rounding out the top 10 list is Crazy Lady by Jane Leslie Conley for offensive language. So, you know, it's a mix of sort of new and old, and I think that's pretty typical of the annual publishing of the top 10 list. Like I said, some of the classics kind of come and go. It's a couple of years ago, the Harry Potter series fell off the top 10 list. It had been on there for a number of years, but finally came off. And
but again, Harry Potter, there's no sex in it. And I've seen some of these. There's no dirty language in it. It's just this fantasy of a bunch of kids or sorcerers. Is that it? Because some people object to that.
You know, I really can't say because I really don't know. I can tell you that a few years ago, probably a couple of years ago, in Oldham County, near Jefferson County, there was a challenge by a parent to a history book. It was a history of witchcraft, and didn't result in litigation, and some sort of pressure from the ACLU and other groups helped the library retain the book on the shelves. I don't know, but I think the Harry Potter series has gotten people concerned about this whole witchcraft thing, and I don't know why this particular history book in the Oldham County Library created a stir, but it did, and so you just never know for sure what's motivating people.
Does your group and the American Library Association and other groups try to go into the community to assuage fears, to try to explain to people? And what would your pitch be to a bunch of parents who say, you know, this is bad stuff?
Yeah, I think unfortunately what happens is the challenges occur before, and the challenges occur and the sort of hysteria happens before we know about it or have a chance to sort of get in there and discuss it. I think the Library Association probably does a better job than the ACLU of the upfront education. They do a lot of stuff throughout the year to sort of talk to people about the importance of the freedom to read and the importance of the First Amendment, all of the First Amendment
and of
freedoms.
course the Banned Books Week,
right,
which we have observed here on our campus.
Yeah.
I think it surprised a lot of students that books are banned, and I know when going into the program where you spoke, they had a shelf full of these banned books, and people. I heard one student say, "I didn't know that book had been banned," and I think that really shocks people and surprises people.
It does, because everybody has a favorite book. You know, we all had either the favorite teacher that had us read the favorite book, or something that, you know, for most of us, books have played a significant role at one point or another in our lives, and so to see that on a list of banned books and something that was near and dear to our hearts, I think really, yeah, it is. It's shocking.
One of the interesting things to recall from my days long ago as a reporter, when this book, As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, was banned by a local school system, I remember interviewing a student, and she said, you know, we weren't going to read that book, but we sure are now. And I thought that was an interesting comment. You have, I believe, in your folder a quote from Judy Blume
I do. Yeah.
that I think would be worth having a listen to. I thought was rather interesting.
Yeah, and Judy Blume was somebody who I really enjoyed as an adolescent, and I think she really speaks. I don't know if so much to men, but certainly to
My
young
wife
girls.
was a big fan of Judy Blume
Yeah.
too. Yes.
So here's and Judy Blume has become quite an activist on censorship issues, and her books have really been challenged a lot over the years. This is her recent quote. "It's not just the books under fire now that worry me. It is the books that will never be written, the books that will never be read, and all due to the fear of censorship. As always, young readers will be the real losers." And I think she's right. I think young readers we really need to be developing a love of reading and learning, and banning this stuff isn't going to help that.
Well, the young lady who I interviewed, she said, "I'm going to read it now."
Yeah, yeah. Now, sometimes I do think it has the opposite effect of what people intended.
It apparently does. So, now, if someone wanted to contact the ACLU of Kentucky, how would they do that?
A couple of ways. We have a website that's www.aclu-ky, that's a dash ky-ky, not an underscore, .org. Or folks can call us if they're interested in if they have a legal question that they want to see if we can help with. That number is area code 502-581-1181. And so, yeah.
Well, now, you're a permanent staffer,
I am a permanent staffer. I'm the executive director.
but most of your folks are volunteers.
All of our lawyers are volunteers. We have a staff of 5 people in our office in Louisville, and we cover the state, but we do have one of the 5 is a staff attorney. That's our first ever. She was hired a couple of years ago, but we still rely heavily on volunteers for our legal cases. The rest of us do all the other stuff, the public education, the lobbying, and all the other kinds of issues that we take on, not in court.
Well, we're out of time. Thank you for being with us today. My guest was Beth Wilson, Executive Director of the ACLU of Kentucky. I'm Barry Craig. Please join us next time.